I was introduced so kindly, it's Katie Reschenhofer. I am doing my PhD at the University of Vienna in Austria in English and American Studies. And today I want to discuss whether we should teach open science as part of our EAP curricula. So before we get started on teaching open science in EAP, I want to give a short, brief, general introduction into open science. So I want to talk about what open science is. And then I want to discuss why we should teach open science in EAP. Then I also want to propose a few ideas on how we could teach open science as part of EAP before giving an insight into the student perspective from what I've learned in my most recently taught EAP class before reaching a final conclusion. So what is open science? Open science generally has the main goal to make research more accessible, usable, and interoperable. Now, unfortunately, as you may know, most high-ranking journals nowadays are still not open access. So as we all know, there are often very high and expensive paywalls that you have to break through to access certain publications. But open science really kind of advocates for prioritizing openness and accessibility over prestige. And if you think about it, openness and prestige don't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive, because the more users have access to your publications and the more readers read your work, the higher the likelihood that you will get cited. And then your impact factor will naturally increase. So open science really kind of benefits anyone if you think about it. So how do we contribute to open science as tutors, scholars, researchers? Well, there are two general routes that you can take. The gold route would be to get your research published in an open access journal straight away. The green route would be to not necessarily get your research published in an open access journal, because there might be a journal that you really want to publish in and that just happens to not be open access. But what you can do in the green route is you can self-archive a free copy of your manuscript, and that can be very, very useful to both you and your students. So I just want to talk about self-archiving for a while. So in my experience for self-archiving, these two websites, Open Door and Sherpa Romeo, have been extremely helpful, in my opinion. So Open Door, this is what the interface looks like, is the directory of open access repositories. And Open Door provides a lot of useful information about repositories such as Zenodo or HAL, where anyone can archive pretty much anything online. Now, before self-archiving a free copy of your work on Zenodo, HAL, or other repositories, it's extremely important to use resources such as Sherpa Romeo. That's what it looks like right here. And Sherpa Romeo provides information about the different journals' policies on self-archiving. So sometimes publishers, so journals, let authors retain so-called author rights. And this is what you kind of need, that's the permission you really need to get in order to self-archive a free copy of your work. So on Sherpa Romeo, you just enter the journal title of the journal you want to publish in, and then you are told whether or not you can actually self-archive a free copy. So I did this with a journal on eco-criticism, for example, and then here we already see open access pathways are permitted by this journal's policy. However, as you can see here highlighted in yellow, there is an open access fee oftentimes associated with making your research open access when it's not published in an open access journal. And if you're associated with a university, the university in most cases will take care of that author fee, this open access fee. And if you're an independent scholar, you might have to pay this out of pocket. So now, why teach open science in EAP? So where do the students come in here? So we're kind of living through this unprecedented case right now, the COVID-19 pandemic, where all of our higher education courses have been moved online. All of our materials are shared online. We can't disseminate hard copies, so real kind of tangible paper in classes. And of course, this often leads to unforeseen circumstances and obstacles for students as well as tutors. So this includes IT setup issues, delays in tutor-student communication or student-student peer communication, and students, one of the most frequent issues that students faced in my experience has been that students couldn't access sources that they would have needed to write their final research papers or reports. So here I want to draw on Tölchen Ostwald, who discussed the need for open science education, and they propose a course outline for how to teach open science in EAP, which I will get to in a moment. But basically, Tölchen and Ostwald show that open science really is a two-way street. So open science practices can benefit young researchers by increasing their visibility and expanding their network. So when publishing your research in an open way, making it accessible, you're of course expanding your network by getting a lot more people to read and access your work. And so young scholars can really connect and find their place in the academic community. Researchers also benefit from the availability of scientific data and code or secondary literature in their own research projects. And this is, for example, where our students come in. The more sources that are open access, the better the research papers will be that our students produce. Now, how do we teach open science as part of EAP? This is the two-part course design by Tölchen Ostwald that I wanted to discuss. It's fairly simple, but extremely effective. So in this course design, the first step would be to convey open science theory and a short introduction to digital and open access tools to students. And then the second step is kind of the larger and more important step here, would be to give students practice in applying open science tools to their own research projects, and then having them present their research projects in the end. So this reminds us of the practice that we may already be used to doing, just that open science really plays an important part in EAP. But first, what's really important is that the tutor needs to feel confident navigating the open science landscape. So in order for us to teach open science resources and tools to students, we need to feel confident with them. So we need to test out everything we want to teach and really kind of get familiar with all of the abundant resources out there. So here, what I found very useful was Reschenhofer's TPCK model. So PCK stands for pedagogy, technology, content, and of course the knowledge that you have to have about these three elements. And it's extremely important, especially when a tutor is new to the open science landscape, that these three elements, so content, technology, pedagogy, align. So here I want to draw on Chan and Wilson, who really advocate for this interoperability of technology fitting in with the teacher's capabilities and competencies, and also aligning with their overall pedagogical approach, and also being just coherent with the course materials and the course content that you want to convey. Now, what might that look like in practice? Well, for instance, we could incorporate open science into our research methodology classes, for example. So here we would teach students how to access open resources. That sounds really simple, but I'll get to that in a moment. Oftentimes it's more complex than we might think. So we really need to show students where to look for resources and how to look for them. We could also give students practice in using these open science tools in a very autonomous way. So we could tell them about existing databases or archives, open source software, such as Gephi, for example, in case you're familiar with that one. And we could also teach them the importance of setting up their own researcher profiles, such as ORCID accounts. That again gives students a boost of confidence, and that they feel that they really have a place and a voice in academia. We may also need to adapt our own academic practice to the open science landscape. So here, I think of referencing sources in bibliographies and reference lists. So the importance of using DOI, so digital object identifiers, in reference lists, or telling students how to cite archived material. So I talked about Zenodo or HAL before, so, or databases, repositories, and so on. If our style guides, the style guides that we have traditionally been using, don't provide any information on how to reference open science resources properly, we as tutors may need to kind of provide that to our students. So as tutors, we of course want to give students as much practice in using digital tools and resources as possible. And this could help them with an abundance of different academic practice. So for instance, in finding academic sources, archiving their own unpublished or published work, creating visuals to make their papers more appealing, and also to reflect on course content. So now I actually want to move on to two examples for how these digital tools and resources can benefit the student and the tutor. So the first example that I would like to present to you is something that I found in a publication by Forsey and Page, and it is a word cloud. So most of you have probably seen word clouds before, and I think that this is a great way to really get students to reflect on course content. So in this case, Forsey and Page asked their students to respond to the following survey question. What 3 words or phrases spring to mind when you think of the format of this unit, so of the taught course? And so then whichever software program or algorithm was used kind of generated the most frequently used keywords and kind of structured this word cloud in the way that you see the most frequently chosen keywords by the students in kind of the largest font. So overall, most students associated the taught unit with being interactive, interesting, engaging, organized, but also asking for a heavy workload. So this is a great way to get students to reflect on course content. However, it's also an amazing way for the tutor to get direct feedback from students in a very honest and anonymous way. So again, here Open Science is this two-way street that both benefits the tutor and the student. The second example of how digital resources can help students would be to help them find sources. So these are 3 online resources that I want to introduce to you that students can use to access accessible sources in case they have barrier issues keeping them from using university library resources, for example. So ERIC is the Education Research Information Center. DOAJ is the Directory of Open Access Journals. I'm sure most of you will be completely familiar with DOAJ. And then a personal favorite of mine is Open Knowledge Maps. So while ERIC and DOAJ are very similar, you basically enter a keyword into the search bar, in my case, EAP Online or Teaching EAP Online, and then you're provided with a list of links that hopefully bring you to a full text at some point. However, Open Knowledge Maps is slightly more helpful, I would say, to students who are just writing their first papers or their first theses, because you not only enter a keyword and are provided with a list of PDFs, but Open Knowledge Maps, as the name already suggests, generates a sort of map, as you can see, where similar PDFs, so book chapters, publications, reports, are grouped together according to a shared topic. So for example, here we have action research, academic writing, blended learning, and so on. So if you were to click on one of those bubbles, you would kind of enter that subcategory, that world of that topic. All right, so now as promised, I want to discuss the student perspective and why certain things that are simple to us may not be as straightforward to students. So the most recent course that I taught was a pre-sessional EAP course that was 100% taught online due to the pandemic. The students were all digital natives, meaning they basically grew up with technology and the internet. They were completely fine with using Microsoft Teams and Moodle. That was not an issue at all. However, what was an issue were the following 3 obstacles. So the first obstacle was IT issues. The students didn't get their university library login data in time, and they just couldn't find academic sources to start researching or drafting their papers. And so what I did was I provided a list of open access databases to my students, such as doedge.org or Open Knowledge Maps, and I thought that that would help the students access sources. However, it turned out to be the second obstacle because students had issues accessing open science resources. And I will show you why in a moment. And then after the second obstacle, the third obstacle had to do with adhering to traditional style guides, because as I mentioned before, if we're dealing with traditional generic style guides, these may not yet include as much information about how to reference open access repositories, archives, databases, and so on. So questions that I got from students sounded like this. So how do I cite this online archived conference report, or which DOI, so digital object identifier links, do I put in my bibliography? So students weren't even sure what DOIs were, and they thought that DOI links were simply the URL links, and they just copied and pasted the URLs into their reference lists. So this just showed me how important it is to really give students practice in using open science, but also letting them know what open science really is, why it benefits all of us, and why it can help them ultimately with their research papers. So before I delve into the student perspective further, a quick recap. Nearly all of the students I previously taught initially had trouble accessing the university library. So they were provided with links to open databases such as doedge.org. And then more than half still emailed me about having issues accessing these open journal articles. And now I want to walk you through why students still had troubles accessing open resources. So this is what the student first sees when they log on to doedge.org. So I typed in EAP Learning Online, for example, and then we click on search. So fairly easy so far. We get a list of results. Let's click on the first one. And then this is the stage where most students had already given up because they saw the following: the title, so information about the publication, and the abstract down here. And so most students told me that they assumed, okay, this article just wasn't an open access full text article because they only were granted access to the abstract. Thankfully, many students did spot the full text button down here and clicked on it. But then this was the second stage where even more students had given up, because when I provided the list to the students, such as to doedge.org, they assumed that doedge.org would host the full text. So they assumed to kind of find the full text on this orange interface. And now being redirected to a completely new website to host the full text really confused students, and they told me that they thought they had clicked on the wrong button. They didn't want to, download a virus or anything. Some even thought that they had landed on a pop-up advertisement page. In this case, probably this could look like an advertisement for an airline, iJet, if you don't read what it says next to it. So only a small portion of students successfully managed to spot the tiny PDF button right here and then click on it and finally be rewarded with the download to the PDF file. So this is just an example for how complex something could be that seems rather simple. And my solution to this would simply be screen sharing. So in my experience, demonstrating something once really boosts learner autonomy. And here I want to draw on Forcing Page again, who really emphasize that we should move towards a stepwise and reflective form of learning and kind of move away from a completely monitored approach where we kind of answer questions every step of the way. So we really have to trust in our students' abilities to engage with the course content. And in my experience, learner autonomy was really boosted the most Once I shared my screen once and I demonstrated how to use open access tools, and then students were happy with that and they could autonomously kind of go their own way. So in conclusion, open science can be a problem solver for barrier issues. It can also provide resources as supplements for EAP curricula, and it can be taught in blended online and face-to-face classrooms. So just like EAP is a skill of doing research, open science is a way of doing research. So EAP ensures that the research is academic, and open science ensures that the research is made accessible. So EAP and open science are both not separate from the student subject. It's kind of just a way to ensure the practice is academic and accessible. So now I want you to think about the following. How can you make your research more open or accessible? How could you adapt your syllabus to include aspects of open science to EAP? And could you imagine introducing open science tools to your EAP classes? So I look forward to discussing that and answering any questions. This is my bibliography, and I thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Katie. Okay, so just having a look through the chat there, I think there are one or two questions. Yeah, so there's one here about, is this kind of more geared towards PhD postgraduate students? I'm just wondering if this kind of thing would be worth also teaching to undergraduate students who might be on an EAP foundation course or similar.
Yeah, I definitely think that this could benefit students of all levels at university, so starting at the bachelor's degree, just because IT issues can always occur. Students can always have trouble accessing their login for the online library resources. So yeah, even students at school could, in my experience, have benefited from open science, just accessing information for free, basically.
Sure. Someone's just writing here, did you have any access issues of open science content with the Great Firewall of China?
Oh,
are you aware of that being an issue at all, if you're based in that part of the world?
Yeah, I was aware of that. I discussed it with my students. Thankfully, in my case, all of my students could access the resources that I had provided to them. The issues were kind of surrounded slow internet connection more than firewall issues.
Sure, okay. So just a quick thing as well. So with open science, it's a place where you can upload your own research and you can see other people's research freely. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I guess the other thought that pops into my mind is there any kind of degree of quality control in terms of the research that's published, i.e. is it peer reviewed or anything like that?
Yes, exactly. So you can, most databases, I would say 99%, don't accept anything. So for example, ERIC, the Educational Resource Information Center I showed before, lets you check a box in the search bar that says peer reviewed only. But most other databases don't even give you the option to uncheck that box, and they just accept peer reviewed research. With repositories, that's a different story. So for example, Zenodo or HAL, theoretically, if I wanted to archive a picture of my lamp, I could post that onto Zenodo right now. So in Zenodo with archives, I would be more, more cautious, but in general, it should be rather safe, especially on databases and archives.
Sure, okay, thank you. Chris Janetta has posted a question saying, do you think more time should be included at the beginning of an EAP course to orientate and induct students to the OS process?
I mean, ideally, yes, the more time dedicated to OS, the better. However, of course, that's unrealistic because in EAP courses, we have so much material and course content to go through that we really have to find a way to just very naturally weave in open science to existing EAP course content. And I just found that by just providing specific links and screen sharing and taught sessions or tutorials or office hours, that that's done in the most time efficient way.
Brilliant, thank you. Just going to have a quick scan through to see if there are any more questions. Yeah, there's an interesting point there from Sonia Woodward saying that finding online sources has become more of an issue now that students cannot easily access libraries. So this is very useful. And I think I'd second that, to be honest, because I'm aware of those issues that you experienced this summer, because I think we were working together at the University of Nottingham, and I do recall there was some issues accessing NewSearch, which is the university's library database. So having an alternative channel or place to go to access research and material is a fantastic thing. So that's really, really good to know about.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's great.
Okay, any more questions? Anybody? I think we've got through most of them.